This is, I think it's the 7th or 8th inspirational talk that we're hosting today, and I'm very excited about the very experienced speakers that we have today with us. What we do in all these inspirational talks is to invite people that can talk about success. They can demonstrate what they are doing and how that works. But we're also going to talk about what makes it difficult to get to the success. So what are the things that that you found on your way? Because sometimes if we present the successes and the results of our work, it looks very appealing to people that don't have it. And I've been in many of such situations. And then you want to know, yeah, but how do I get there? So that's an important part of these inspirational talks, and the training in itself is how did you get there? And then, because it always helps to get people on board, you have to understand the why as well. So why is this important? Why do we work on this for the short term, for the long term? And then if we are convinced together with all of us that we should work on this, then how can we take a first step in this, and what will be the next one? So that's what we're going to talk about in every inspirational talk. And today we're going to focus on what we call vibrant startup ecosystems. And I think we all have a feeling of what it is and that it should be important. But we have 3 speakers that are going to help us in building that case and getting a better understanding of what it is and how you could achieve that. And with that, I would first like to introduce the speakers. Actually, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. And I'm going to do that in order of appearance. So how you got into the call. So with that, I first would like to go to Tamas, who was here already, but he's cheating a bit because he's already in Hungary. So all of the Hungarian organization people are in Hungary. So that's why he was in first, I guess. Tamas, can you introduce yourself a bit, your background?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, much, Roel, for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today for this inspirational talks session. So my name is Tamas Szeker. As Roel mentioned, I'm originally from Hungary, but I've been living in Barcelona for more than 2.5 years now. So today I'm going to represent the Barcelona ecosystem and share my experiences with you with regard to building vibrant startup ecosystems there. What do? I work as an international business development strategist, trainer, and also business growth partner. And I'm also a co-founder of HealthIL, which is a global innovation platform that helps ambitious scale-ups scale and succeed globally through bespoke growth catalyst programs and also individual advisory. So far in my life, I've lived in 6 different countries across 3 continents, some from Hungary, but I've lived in France, South Korea, Malaysia, Colombia, and now in Spain. And I've had the chance to work with different types of and stages of startups, scale-ups, universities, government institutes, VCs, incubators, accelerators, and innovation consulting firms in my career so far. I also work together with a Spanish international startup consulting firm called Strata that helps European deep tech startups get grants up to 2.5 million euro and equity investment up to 15 million euro from the EIC accelerator. And I'm also an active member of the South Europe Startup Awards, which is part of the Global Startup Awards. You might also know this organization because they have different regional angles, different regions in Europe and also globally. And I'm specifically focused on Spain and nominating and celebrating different startup ecosystem players there. I think we will also cover this, so I'm happy to share more about this kind of experience and also my general experience when it comes to the Barcelona ecosystem and building vibrant communities there. So looking forward to the chat, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that introduction. 2 takeaways I'm going to get from your introduction. So first is the international component from yourself, but also what you're working on. I think we've defined innovation in the drive training context as something an innovative company that is able to create a new product that is internationally competitive. So you need to get to an international market.
That's exactly. So this is how we specifically help startups, international expansion, fundraising, international business development. One of the key challenges, to be honest, when startups start to scale and which target market to choose, how to scale, how to find new clients, how to pitch to investors, even in different cultures, could be super challenging. So yeah, this is the key angle.
Yeah, and that's the other part as well so funding, so money, it's always a challenge.
Exactly.
How to get the money. So great to have you here today with us and share your experience. And then I would like to go to Alexandre Mendes. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Alex. I'm based in Portugal. Mostly I feel European, so my scope is usually super European, even though I've been working also in the US, mostly Boston actually. So my regards, Tamas, for you. Well, I'm based in Portugal, and pretty much what sums up my journey here is, well, the recurrent economic crisis that Portugal enjoys somehow. So in 2008, I was in Germany. I flew back to Portugal, and eventually I decided to join the forces that were trying to make Portugal a better country. Especially at the time we were having a super brain drain. Everybody was leaving the country. So this eventually took me to start working in the entrepreneurship scene, and not only working because we didn't have that much established at the time, but also creating this idea of ecosystem, gathering companies, gathering investors, bringing people from the US or other countries from Europe to Portugal, and to try to create this tech ecosystem that that nowadays we can enjoy. So in practical terms, this put me to perform a role of ecosystem builder, designing acceleration programs. I ran incubators, public incubators too, and then started bridging with other countries and players in Europe, and also in the US, obviously. Nowadays, I'm the head of ventures of a group of companies, mostly dedicated to software development, but my background so far is related to digital health, nanotechnology, digital economy, especially business-to-business software. And nowadays, I've been working quite a lot also with Web3.
Okay, great. Thank you. Again, I'm going to take two takeaways from your introduction. So the one is Portugal has risen a lot in the innovation scoreboard, right? Coming from mediocre to high levels of innovation capacity. We're definitely going to come back to the how you did that. It's easy to say that you did that, but so how difficult was that, and what steps are important to take into account with that? That's very important, I think, to learn from you. And the other thing,
to be here.
Sorry,
it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And the other thing I think is very important as well is your experience from the US and in Europe. And I think we're going to dive into that with Yoav as well. But the US and the Israeli ecosystem are much more high risk oriented, and there's typically more budget available for startups, but also for programs, compared to many of the European regions. So it's interesting to take that aspect into account as well, I guess, to what can we learn from other ecosystems that we can apply in our regions as well. So welcome. And with that, I would like to go to Yoav. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course. So welcome to my apartment in Tel Aviv. It is actually very hot and very humid today. Summer officially started. I'm actually very excited to talk to you about everything that we're experiencing here. As Roel said, there's quite this perception that Israel has a lot of innovation going on. That's true. But in order to really understand what works and what doesn't, it's really important to talk about the nuances and the difficulties and the challenges of how to create an effective ecosystem. That's kind of what I want to share with you. I work for an organization called HealthIL. HealthIL is the only national ecosystem for health tech. What does that mean? It means I am a nonprofit. The people who are on my board is the Israeli Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Economy, and the Innovation Authority. My job is to work holistically with all of the stakeholders to address the challenges and difficulties of integrating technology into healthcare. So I work literally with everyone, with hospitals, with the government, with investors, with all of the startups, with pharma companies who are here, all the way through people like NVIDIA and Oracle, all with a very formal process of trying to figure out what they need, their issues, how they operate, what they can contribute to startups, what they can contribute to each other, and basically overcoming all of these issues with creating a vibrant and effective mechanism for implementing technology into healthcare. I personally come from the venture background. I used to work for one of the leading VCs here in Israel, focused on health. So in a weird way, now that I see everything, I'm a much better VC now than I ever was. And it gives a lot of added value to the system when there's someone who can speak money and speak venture, because as everyone said, cash is a huge component of it, and you can't deny that fact either. So excited to share everything that we're seeing here that works and doesn't work and why.
Great, that sounds terrific. Also, your remark about it takes a lot of nuance. So let's take time for that as well in this talk. So we will dive into content shortly, but I'll invite everybody who has questions, just either put them in the chat or raise your hand. It's definitely meant also to be interactive. So I know that everybody is working on the topics that just have been mentioned, and feel free to raise your hand or raise a question in the chat or just open up your mic. It's all here to share. And with that, I would like to. So I asked Tamas, Alexandre, and Yoav to prepare a question about what does it actually mean, a vibrant ecosystem for startups. So when is your, say, coalition of startups or the presence of the startups in your region, when does it become vibrant? Maybe let's start with that. And with that, I would like to ask Alexandre now first. Maybe you can give some perspective of that. So how do you regard that? What makes it vibrant?
So I've been working in this space since for the last 12 years. For me, my current definition of a vibrant ecosystem, put simple, is, or a good measure of the vibrancy of the ecosystem is how organic things start to happen. So usually ecosystems start very concentrated in some players, super focused on some stakeholders that are trying to nudge the ecosystem. My current criteria regards to have this organic side, when new people arrive, move in, start doing things, start investing, and you start losing control of everything that is happening. That for me is super positive, because that is a good meaning of an ecosystem. And the second step there is start noticing the spillover effects. So you already had entrepreneurs thriving somehow, being back to mentor, and perhaps to start doing that business angel investing that sometimes is so hard. So these would be my two key criteria here. Again, being organic. So it's an ecosystem, several players, several roles, several dynamics and intersections. And the second one, the spillover effects, when you start giving back and, well, preparing the next generation.
Thank you. Excellent topic. Can you give an example of something that you experienced when you thought, okay, I didn't expect this, or I'm losing control here, and something happened and I didn't have anything to do with it? Great.
Yeah. For instance, nowadays our local ecosystem, so super local, not necessarily Portugal as a whole, up here in the north, we started noticing a pattern of expertise, of talent being developed in blockchain. So we have people, companies here working with this technology that now is really hyped, but they are working in this technology since 2012. And this was pretty organic because part of the city strategy, of the university strategy, of several investors that we brought in, was to develop technology for the digital health space. And perhaps on the other side would be developing, say, deep tech for the self-driving car, since we have some industries here developing technology for that specific segment. So this was the mayor's idea, the rector's idea, of the Minister of Economy, to make Braga a special place for the digital health space. What eventually happened is that nowadays we are acknowledged for providing the right conditions for an entrepreneur to start their startup here in that space. But side by side, an independent community also started developing their own companies, their own startups. And eventually, one can argue what's bigger nowadays, the blockchain community or the digital health community. And my intention is actually to do what we do in ecosystems, start building the intersection of these two and start bringing this conversation and mixing these two communities to help people understand how can we put blockchain in the health industry.
Yeah.
And merging these conversations is really tactical. So in the end, don't get me wrong, but mostly my role is putting two different communities talking with each other. So it's really simple, subtle, and complicated also. But so far, this would be an example that I would provide visibility to.
Okay, great, thank you. And with that, I would like to go to Yoav, who just said that he is talking to everybody. So maybe Yoav, you can give your reflection on what makes a good, vibrant ecosystem for you.
Yeah, so I think the question at the beginning was about successful ecosystem for startups, right? And I think I want to go back to what you said originally. An ecosystem involves a lot of different players beyond just startups, obviously. And my point is that they're going to measure and quantify and define success totally differently. And that's also going to be different than how we, HealthIL, myself as an ecosystem, define success, right? So for a startup, a success could be just as simple as, I raised a seed round for 1.3 million euros. Is that necessarily successful for the ecosystem? Maybe not if it's just LP money that's being thrown away, right? But from the perspective of the founder, that could be enough as of a success. So here is where I see quite a lot of the challenge is how do you create a situation where you can quantify success across two or more stakeholders within your ecosystem, right? I'll give you another situation from the perspective of a hospital, right? A hospital could have successfully done a pilot. Great. Does that necessarily lead to further integration down the road? Does that mean that some hospital in Barcelona is going to put in this technology and put it to use for the patients around the city of Barcelona? Who knows? So again, that concept of what creates a successful ecosystem needs to be defined per stakeholder. And I will go even a step further. Within that, different stakeholders within just hospitals or within just startups are going to define success differently, right? Success for a seed stage startup is going to be different than a growth stage startup. So it's really important to actually quantify success in different ways between all the stakeholders, and then you can kind of map out the overlaps. That gives some indication of who can work together well.
Okay, and if success is there, if it has arrived for, say, sufficient people in your ecosystem, so what would that look like? What would people see if they come to your ecosystem and talk to people? When would they say this is successful for me as being here in the ecosystem? This helps me.
So we get a lot of visitors to Israel, obviously, right? I mean, I had Luxembourg yesterday. I had Austria a week ago. Denmark. Yeah, a lot of people come to Israel. It's close to Europe. Very much interested in the innovation here, and they see what they define as success, right? And I think at the highest level, when you're looking from an ecosystem perspective, the successful interchange and fostering of collaborations would be our success, right? Our success as the ecosystem, as that stakeholder, the transfer of resources, knowledge, whatever, the collaborations, and what do you measure as a collaboration and what types of collaboration, that's what we define as a success, right? So that's how we see it. That's the information that we bubble up to, government that helps support us here in Israel. And I think that's what people see when they come to visit Israel, is that vibrant exchange of knowledge. And yes, that happens quite a lot in Israel. We help foster it a lot. Israel is also a very small country, so we, obviously within 2 degrees of separation, you can get to everybody. But from the ecosystem perspective, we're trying to foster effective, relevant collaborations across all stages, right? From an observational study through commercialization, through, having AWS and Google work with the government on cloud services. Successful collaboration is how we as an ecosystem define success.
Okay, thank you. So we see the overlap now between vibrance and success, right? It's success generates, propels vibrance, I guess. It makes people happy as well.
Look, just by the law of statistics, if you make enough meetings, something's supposed to happen eventually, right? Law of big numbers.
Yeah, so with that, I'm going to go to Tamas. Tamas, give us your perspective.
Yeah, these actually are very good points that the other speakers highlighted, because we can talk about vibrant startup ecosystem, but we can also talk about how we'll measure the success, right? So what will be those KPIs based on which we'll measure that, okay, is it like a successful startup ecosystem? Let me also add a couple of more points on what the others mentioned, because I think when it comes to vibrant startup ecosystem and creating a strong and also successful ecosystem, the vision also something that matters very much. And in order to have like a long-term vision for the ecosystem itself, you will need entrepreneurs, like committed entrepreneurs who are coming from high growth companies, maybe startup funders who will take the responsibility to build the ecosystem itself, to build the communities itself, take their time as well, and who can imagine themselves in the ecosystem, building the specific ecosystem in a certain location for at least 10 years. This is something that also Brett Feld also mentioned in his book, Startup Communities, but it's also something that I believe Barcelona is I think well represents among many other ecosystems. You need strong entrepreneurs who are taking the leadership role, the lead role to build and to lead the ecosystem itself. They have a long-term commitment for at least 10 years, which is actually tough. Just imagine that as an entrepreneur, you might not necessarily want to stick to one certain city. And also, you should be fully inclusive, which means that whoever wants to, let's say, change job, come from, let's say, could be corporate service providers, universities, someone changing job wants to get into the startup ecosystem, you should be super inclusive, accept everybody and anybody to join the ecosystem itself. You should foster collaboration, and you should also continuously, regularly have to run certain events and activities to engage with the entrepreneurial stack, to bring together people. And here I would also highlight that also you have mentioned that collaboration, connecting people in the ecosystem, could it be from the university side, corporate side, startup side, investors, mentors? Let's bring these people together, government institutes. I don't want to miss like any players, but let me just mention some. Let's bring these people together. Let's create different platforms, events, channels where we can bring these people and entities together. Let's foster collaboration, and also let's celebrate successes, because the ecosystem would just burn out, right? If no one celebrates successes, and you would also be more fulfilled to get recognized for something that you achieve. And also, let's be brave and admit our failures and talk about our failures. And I think it's also super important. And this was something that really surprised in Barcelona, actually, that they had an event there called Fuck Up Nights. I know that this event is also in many other cities, but people were like super open to share about their failure stories. And this is also like a mindset shift that needs to happen in certain countries or regions. Let's be brave about talking about our failures, because failure is not the end of the story. It's just part of the way leading to success. And let's try to learn about each other's successes, and let's be open and share our successes to fully like people that we don't know. And so this is how I would kind of like describe a vibrant ecosystem. Again, entrepreneurs take the leadership role, who has a long-term commitment. It's fully inclusive. Anybody can join the ecosystem itself and the community itself, and it basically runs different types of events. If you want, I can also maybe share, Roel, maybe a good practice on kind of activities that I've seen in Barcelona that I saw very like unique and special for connecting people and fostering collaboration.
Well, maybe you can keep that thought for the next part of this when we dive into the how, because I would like to raise one more element. I think you've given great examples of the KPIs and about losing control and being effective in your collaboration, and these are very true points, I guess. And the organic thing is also very important. I think what Alexandre mentioned. So you can organize a lot, but somehow you need to get to the point where you don't control anything anymore, and you can support what's already happening and bring that further. That's brilliant, I think. But so I didn't come up with the term the vibrant ecosystem, but when I learned that phrase from the people from InnoStars, I also thought about say fun and excitement as an innovation ecosystem. Then what to what extent do you think that is important? When I compare, I'm working at the TU Delft, but with a lot of startups as well. But if I go to a science conference, there's a really different atmosphere than when I'm at a startup community event. And typically some of the more entrepreneurial scientists are there as well, and some other stakeholders, but it's a really different atmosphere. So can you say something about that? To what extent is that relevant? And is that a thing, or is that something that, because they're younger people often, is it something that you should foster? Someone wants to comment on that?
Shall I answer this question, or?
Well, maybe Alexandre first, and then Tamas.
Sure.
Okay, so for me, the form is super important, and that has to do with even the visual language of things, the quality of the websites, the quality of design, and whatever goods you're producing. also the style of communication is super important. And it's super important because, well, we've always had incubators in life, but these new founders don't go to those incubators because both languages don't match. So you need to match the language that actually works. And this is about being effective, like Yoav was mentioning. This is fun, this is hyped, this is young, and you can use t-shirts all the time, but this is about effectiveness. It's not to goof around or play around. If you are one of these players, you won't achieve nothing and you won't find new founders. On the other hand, if you build serendipity and people see that you're okay to work with, easy to talk with, deliver results and progress to your startup, it becomes organic. So it's really cool to find this balance where you can talk, be easy, flexible, but also super keen, super sharp, and delivering progress, growth, and whatever business outcome that you're promising. So for me, bridging this communication is super important. So I totally or consistently bet in communication and matchmaking the communication style. Sometimes when I work with very homogenic science, with strong scientific backgrounds, founders, they usually need to go through this first step of loosening up and, well, becoming easier to talk with a stranger, network, talk with an investor, chill out and start focusing on progress and delivering results. And what's more important, regardless of being sometimes perhaps even disrespectful, because if you want to be an innovator, you will have to be a challenger. And also this restlessness and this grand vision that Tamas was mentioning is super magnetic. It helps people get together and find their role and share the vision. So again, this is something that costs zero, but demands a super important leadership skill that ideally will be shared by many in that ecosystem. So for me, form is really important. Matchmaking the language, the visuals to the current zeitgeist, to the current way of thinking, to the current needs, and not doing or running our acceleration programs or incubators or ecosystem just because we need to pay our bills, but because it's meaningful for the ecosystem and we are raising the bar there. So in Berlin, there's an investor that I really love because they have a creative director, and that creative director only manages the brand. So it's very strong in what comes to visually and also how people talk, all the mentors talk and engage with the entrepreneurs there. So for me, that's definitely a strong point of an ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. I really like your remark about that it's nice to have a bustling event, but it needs to be effective and it has a purpose, and it is to open up communication and interaction, and that it should lead to serendipity in the end.
Yeah, but it's funny, really funny that people see those two sides as mutually exclusive. You can either be fun or effective, and that's not true.
No, it's really to bring it together to...
and please, it's really important that we don't fall into the hype of doing, well, t-shirt events.
Yeah.
But in the end, founders are about results, and everybody will follow results and effectiveness, not, well, fun events. There's a lot of parties already, even though partying is important.
Thank you. Tamas, anything to add?
I mean, very good point. I also agree, like speaking about fun and excitement, as you mentioned, Roel, definitely important part of a strong startup community. And I just want to also reflect that I agree that it should be balanced. So I think very important is be yourself, like don't want to act like someone else. So you are a super funny guy, when like really be yourself. That's the first point. And you can merge both, because you can still remain credible and a good professional, showcasing all those values that you and your company has to showcase, but still be funny at the same time, or be like an easygoing person. According to my experience, because I do business development a lot, and as a startup funder, when you go to different networking events, it's actually about having fun at the same time, while also representing yourself in a credible way. It's networking events are not going there and pitching your solutions. Networking events is going to different types of events and offering help, seeing like how you can create value to someone else, and having fun for them, because eventually you have to build human relationships, and which can happen when you have some drinks or have some super informal conversation with people, even investors, even startup funders, even potential clients, for example. And people want to work together with you because you've connected on the human level. And now they are interested that, hey, what are the services that you are offering? Because I want to work together with you. Or if not, I want to offer you as a person to someone else because I really like you as a person. So fun should definitely be part of how you do things. But please, by doing so, also be credible and showcase the values and all those things that you represent with your company. But again, super. So I agree. It's
okay. Thank you. Maybe Yoav, I would like to move into the how part of the discussion. And as you were mentioning that you organize actually for the startup ecosystem, the stakeholder network, so to say. You work with everybody so that they can have an effective field of operation. These are my words, but that's how I got your introduction of the work that you do. So if we want to facilitate, because there are many people here in the call that have similar roles, they play a role in their ecosystem to facilitate others to work effectively. Can you give us an example of one of the things that is one of the first things that people should start doing if they want to start organizing their ecosystem on behalf and for their startups and the other stakeholders that play a part in it?
Yeah. So you mentioned the first step, which is understanding how different stakeholders define success. But let's take it a couple of levels deeper, right? Because there's a number of different avenues for her. You can explore startup to some organization. You can explore investors to startups. You can explore organization to organization. You can explore government to startup. There's many different avenues. What I see that is successful is that when you look at these two sides, you need to define with them the mutual strategy whereby they operate, their mutual contribution to this potential collaboration, the mutual value that they will get out of this, how they quantify the output of it, and the resources they bring to this, what is a resource and what they get out of it. And that's at the highest level, and it's regardless of who these two types of organization is, right? The inner workings of it are going to change, whether it's some organization to a tech company, like a hospital to Oracle. And it's going to be different if it's like Medtronic to a startup or Pfizer to a hospital, whatever. But those core things are going to be critical every single time if you want to foster something that's an effective collaboration. Again, as I said, how they operate, the strategy, what they contribute to this, what resources they have coming into it, what resources they can give to the collaboration, what value get out of it. Without doing this homework first, you're just creating a mechanism for ad hoc meetings, which that's not what we're in here to do, right? Anyone can go into Google and LinkedIn and create ad hoc meetings. We're here to give the much deeper value.
So I think that's a very good message, that organizing effective collaboration it takes a lot of work, because if you say if you would organize something like this for two partners in your ecosystem, how long would it take to facilitate these talks and to have concrete outcomes after something like this?
It really depends on the situation, right? If I'm looking at something that's, the government at the ministerial level, that's a policy prescription that affects tech companies, that's going to take a long time till everyone agrees on what it is and what it means and what the value is. That's going to take a lot longer than investor in a startup. That takes a very short amount of time to make the connection. Even there, you still need to do work. If you really want to be good, then you need to dig one level deeper than what appears on a website, right? Every founder has a difference between what they offer on their website and the reality of what they can do and what they want to do. Much like every investor is going to say we're entrepreneur first. What does that really mean? So if you want to be effective, you do need to dig a little bit deeper. But the speed that you're asking about really depends on the situation. Certain actors move a lot faster. Certain actors obviously are going to move a lot slower.
Yeah. And then Israel, of course, has the benefit of not being part of the EU. So if you talk about...
I don't know if that's a benefit. Okay.
Well, when you talk about let's set up a new structure for a law for medtech companies to operate in, to set some boundaries, it takes longer in the EU than it has other advantages to be in the EU, but it's
probably. I'll take your word for it. It probably is a little bit faster here. That doesn't mean that it's better, by the way.
No, but it's different at least. I think in terms of speed, it's different. And have you developed or maybe just used an existing standard methodology for that? So that you say, okay, these are always the questions that we need to answer for an effective collaboration.
There's in certain aspects of what we've done, we've actually set up a very proper and formal methodology. Specifically our work with healthcare organizations, hospitals, HMOs, clinics, things of that nature. We've over time actually developed a step-by-step process for them on how to engage with the rest of the ecosystem, to the point where every hospital in Israel is using this massive big Excel checklist effectively that we developed. It took about a year, where it literally goes through everything. You want to work with a startup? This is what stage they're in. This is the type of collaboration. Here's a checklist for all of your IT department. Here's a checklist for all of your legal department. We're really there's a lot of things that we've built that are qualitative and quantitative that are purposefully built around a methodology. So the answer is yes, but it depends on the actors. Other actors, it's more qualitative and ad hoc. Certain actors, specifically healthcare organizations, we actually have a formalized process that pretty much everyone in Israel has gone through with us.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's an excellent example.
I'm happy to share that Excel. If anybody's in the health space and works with hospitals, it can be a huge value for you guys.
That was actually going to be my next question. Is there something that we can learn more concretely about that? But that would be so helpful, I think, for people to use themselves. Then going back to Tamas, can you say something about what you would recommend to people if you're gonna give an acceleration to the collaboration in your startup ecosystem? Start here. It's very important to work on that.
Yeah, my number one advice is let's start with a mindset shift when building an ecosystem and when connecting with players and fostering collaboration. I think this is step number one, which actually is not an easy not an easy process could take some time. What do I mean by that? We should build an ecosystem and a community where people want to offer help without expecting anything in return, any instant, something in return. free mentorship, for example. Entrepreneurs do free mentor classes, for example, mentoring hours, for example. Give first before we want to get something in return, and make contacts, make friends, and not contacts. I think these three things truly represent that how you should start off and how you should form the ecosystem itself. And it first starts with a mindset shift. This is something that Barcelona is actually like inheritedly working like this. The spirit of innovation plus the collaborative mindset. I think because also of the international environment is pretty big in Barcelona. And that's why whenever I go to events, different types of events, people go there and just want to help each other and teach less, to be honest. And they are like looking to how I can help the other, how I can connect to someone else. Everybody wants to become some sort of super connectors. And if I meet a startup, okay, yeah, I have an investor, maybe I can introduce you to that person. I work with these companies, maybe I can make an introduction, etc. Approaching on the micro level, or maybe what accelerators or incubators can do, or different ecosystem players to foster collaboration, connect different people. Let me just share two examples with you on the micro level that I've seen in Barcelona, just to also to have an additional things to what you have said. So in Barcelona, there is an accelerator called Startup Investor Accelerator that basically train individuals to become angel investors. They design programs. And half a year ago, they started organizing open cafe startup networking events in Barcelona. The first event, they only had like 7 attendees and in a small pub, but continuously they managed to have like 12 events by date and more than 1,200 attendees. What was the success around this is that many people who were in Barcelona, and also people who arrived to Barcelona and just came for a visit or wanted to get to know the ecosystem better, they had the chance to get together. It was a free event basically, and the idea was that there were also some events that was like up to 100 people basically. And we started with a short introduction. So everybody had the opportunity to introduce themselves in 30 seconds, or let's say 1 sentence. So we immediately knew the other person, what they are up to, whether they are startup funders, investors coming from incubator, accelerator, maybe they are mentors, funders that have successfully exited a startup, something like that. So we could already know like whom to speak to if you want to help, offer help or something. Then there were like smaller groups when startups could share their own challenges. And it was kind of like a peer-to-peer mentoring, because startups share their challenges. Let's say I have problems with sales prospecting. I don't know how, I have bad conversion rates in terms of onboarding new clients, and the other people could answer those questions. That we could help each other. So we could again foster the collaboration. And after that, there was an open space with some beer for networking. And it was so easy to go to people because we saw each other's challenges, we already knew each other because there was an introduction round, and we could just really have a conversation in a fun way. And again, I highlight in a fun way, in an informal way, talking a bit about the challenges, but also building the human connection, the human relationship. So this was something that worked very well. So they organize this event in every second week, and they have in every event like 100 attendees, because people who are also in Barcelona, they find them on Eventbrite and they want to join them to get to know the local startup ecosystem. Another thing that I wanted to say is that Barcelona is actively positioning itself also on the macro level and also on the micro level as a city, a startup hub, the international startup hub and tech city in Europe. And also on the macro level, there are organizations, Barcelona Activa, Barcelona Tech City, that are actively working on positioning the city internationally. But at the same time, there is also a company called Club Globals that kind of supports this vision because they organize exclusive networking events after each and every big conferences in Barcelona or in Madrid. You might have heard about South Summit in Madrid, or 4 years from now, Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, EU Startup Summit. A couple of weeks ago, we had the EU Startup Summit. And after these conferences, they normally at the Sky Lounge, they organize an exclusive networking events and in order to connect tech leaders, entrepreneurs with each other. The idea is that many people coming from abroad, maybe for the first time in Barcelona. And the problem is that normally these organizations that run the big events, South Summit or Mobile World Congress, etc., they normally have 1 or 2 networking events or after work events after the event. So the people who arrive to Barcelona, they have limited options to choose from. So that's why they run this event. many people come here for the first time and they connect them with the local startup ecosystem. It's an exclusive event, more than approximately 100 people joining. And because it's a rooftop terrace, people can have like a 360 view of Barcelona and find and meet with investors, ecosystem players, founders, mentors, and even like government institutes. Last time I met someone from Exeter, Estonia, for example. So very, very interesting people. So these are like 2 examples on what you can do, let's say, as an organization in order to bring the ecosystem together and even engage with someone who is visiting your country or your city, because eventually you also want them to kind of like come to your city. You want to attract talents, you want to attract investors, and you also want to attract more startups to establish an operation in your country or your city. So these are like 2 examples that I saw in Barcelona I wanted to share with you.
Okay, thank you very much. I really like the last example about positioning and then also making use of interesting features from your area to organize a high-level meetup, and that's I think that's very important. So, but talking about the first part, I think the mind shift, right? The mindset shift. You coming from Central Europe and now working in Barcelona, I would like to ask specifically, because we have been talking about that a lot in the drive training, how you compare the mindset in the Central European countries and where you're working now, and if say the good example that you give, just if you organize an event, start with some pitches and some people introducing themselves. Would that work as well in Central Europe, do you think?
I think so, but I think so, but I think it takes some time. So the culturally or also historically, so the key difference is that Hungary and also the region itself, maybe because of the history, maybe because of the culture in general, we tend to be more risk averse, which also has a direct or indirect impact on the entrepreneurial mindset, starting from the universities. Okay, who wants to start a startup? Well, or how many innovation programs do we have in Hungary when it comes to universities? Well, we still need some improvement there, of course. And people rather just stick to being an employee or something than start a business, or let's say, especially like a high growth business, like a startup. So this was, I mean, one of the first things that the risk-taking attitudes that you immediately see that, yeah, let's try it, do it, let's fail fast. And try it again, and because failure is part of the way to success. And here comes the second point directly from this: sharing success, sharing failures. This is also something that I think, especially in the region, we tend to speak, like in the CE region, we tend to speak about successes. Yes, that let's stick to speaking about successes. But when it comes to failures, we just want to hide, right? That I don't want to know. I don't want to let others know that I've failed in something. Let's just talk about successes. And it was for me, it was very different there. I arrived there and I attended fuck up nights. And I was like, wow, these guys are super brave, going there to 50, 100 people that they have never met before and sharing a fuck up story. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. And let's see how we can, let's say, implement something similar in Budapest. Actually, Budapest already has fuck up nights, but I don't know like how activities, like how often they run such events. But it has to, like, you have to run such activities to shape the mindset itself, which actually takes time. But having said that, it doesn't mean that it's impossible to implement these kind of activities in order to do some sort of mindset shift in the region or in Hungary, but it might take some time. And also, I think, especially in Hungary, we don't have so many success cases when it comes to startups, you know, with international growth or international success stories. Okay, Prezi and some others, but we need to see really more startups that, yeah, it's really possible. If you get also the necessary support coming from the ecosystem, you can also be big, but dare to fail. If failure is not a shame, it's part of the thing. If you have an unsuccessful, I don't know, fundraising, it doesn't mean that you have a bad idea or a bad product. Maybe just the investor itself, but you also have to think that, okay, what adjustments I can do on the product? Yeah, so these are some just to reflect on the mindset shift. These are like some of the things I wanted to mention here.
Okay, thank you. Alexandre, what would you like to bring to the table that people should definitely work on to create a more vibrant ecosystem?
Well, I think that we need to be really sharp in assessing our ecosystem readiness. Everyone knows the technology readiness levels and perhaps the investment readiness levels. I think we should develop a shared guideline for the same thing, but to assess ecosystems. Sometimes there are more mature, others there are not, and that's fine. Let's work on that. But by knowing the readiness of the ecosystem, you know what ingredients to put in place and where to, well, bet somehow. Every ecosystem needs a narrative, and that narrative should be strong. Ideally, you can find some role models, some people that were somehow, say, a trailblazer, opening up the way for others to come. So if that happens, it becomes way easier to be, to start building groups around that and to build a trend around that. So I would assess the readiness of the ecosystem. Events play a huge role, but you need to be, so when we are active players of an ecosystem, we are constantly running against being obsolete. It's really easy for us as institutions or players to keep doing things that we were doing 2 years ago. And that doesn't make any sense at all any longer. So it's really funny for us to plan how to manage the ecosystem, because we can't be lazy, and we can it demands innovation for us, for ourselves. Then we need to empower all the cross-pollinators that, for instance, Tamas was sharing. People will do the role for us. We just need to be enablers. But to be that enabler, we need to have this broadband leadership where we control the narrative, we align incentives, we allocate resources, and perhaps sometimes create these avenues or spaces for collaboration. So my personal experience is that people are well-intended, everyone wants to help, and everyone has 30 minutes. So if you find the right pitch to capture that person's attention, that person will help for sure. Sometimes, well, we can or must play around with the agendas and be more flexible, but expecting the best is something that we need to be very keen on, because it's also true that it's very draining to try to boost an ecosystem. So always expect the best, and results always happen. I would totally recommend, this is already a classic, but Tamas mentioned the book a while ago, and it's worth it, from Brad Feld, Startups Communities. It's really useful. If you don't want to read the full book, there's a blog post from Brad that is equally interesting, and it drops everything there. But my point is, it's important to understand the ecosystem map, and like Yoav was mentioning, to understand what are the incentives, how will these different stakeholders collaborate, and in the end, what is supposed to happen. And eventually this needs to put us to think, who should ignite the ecosystem? what's making us ignite the ecosystem? Some European funding initiative, and now we want to, we need to find a way to spend that money. Is that it? For instance, when we started in Portugal, it was quite the opposite. We had no money whatsoever, but we had 30% of young graduates unemployed. And nowadays, we don't have talent enough for all the startups being created. So it's a different problem. So the readiness of the ecosystem is something that I would totally incentivize you to pay some attention, because it's really important to know how Israel is doing it, how Canada is doing it, how Silicon Valley and Boston is doing it. And this is an important tweak, because sometimes we talk about the US, and Silicon Valley is quite different from Boston.
Yep.
And what works in the Valley doesn't work in Boston. And we need to be aligned with the industry or market that we are exploring. For instance, in European terms, what works in Berlin is different from what works in Munich. And that's really interesting and challenging. And so we need to be well educated about different ecosystems, different acceleration processes there. But in the end, let's not copy. Let's leverage the ingredients according to the readiness of our own ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. Very wise words. I would like to go to the participants now. We prepared a small Mentimeter. It is to see so listening to all of the experiences that you have, we want to see, so where are the participating regions here in terms of their ecosystem development? Maybe Christina.
Yeah, sure. I will share my screen.
Yes, if you'd like to. So everybody can go to menti.com. It's on the top of the page here, menti.com. And if you put in the code 21923592, then everybody can enter the questions and then start immediately by giving us an answer on where everybody is coming from right now. Yeah, so I guess that's Georgia that was in for the first. I think we're with 44 people in the call, so let's wait until everybody's in. So I guess, Alexandre, you brought a number of colleagues or people from your region.
I can see that. We are deeply engaged in building ecosystem here.
Very good. Actually, I do see people coming in from Porto, from Coimbra, from Évora, from Lisbon. So it's quite an active country in the ecosystem development. Give it another 30 seconds. Okay, so let's move to the next question. Yeah. So this is about, to what extent do you have a startup ecosystem? And of course, this is also a perception of words. Of course, what do you mean with a community and startups and with vibrance? But we talked about that in this talk. So I think I'm happy to see there's already 5 people. I don't know to what extent all the speakers also participated in this in these answers, but I'm happy to see that there are at least more than 3 people that believe that they have a vibrant community, but also that there's already 9 participants who say at least they have a community. And then we talked about a number of things that you can do to build that on a more structural basis, to extend the basis that you have to structural collaboration, that you can become more effective in supporting the collaboration within the community. And then we've also seen, so for the 5 people that say, okay, we do have startups, but there are no community yet, I think especially Tamas and Alexandre shared some first important things that you should work on then. And then Yoav mentioned more the follow-up activities if you have the first basis of a community. So this is, I'm happy that no one answered we don't have any innovative startups. So we're making progress here as the InnoStars RIS Hub community. Maybe next question. So listening to our speakers, I'm just wondering if everybody thinks, no, we're done. So me as being an ecosystem developer in my region as well, so this in the Netherlands, we learned a lot from since I think 20 years ago, but I would say we still have a lot of work to do. But and I think we all agree there that this is not something that you're done with in the end. But I really enjoy what Alexandre, what you mentioned. We should have a what did you call it? Ecosystem readiness level.
Yes.
I think that's very important. And then indeed also say how to prevent yourself from becoming obsolete. I really believe that that's really effective. And in different stages of your maturity, you can do different things, and maybe different actors need to do stuff. But it's I think that's very powerful, that and that should be developed. So and I think that's confirmed by the outcomes of this questionnaire.
And perhaps an Erasmus program for ecosystem leaders.
That would be nice. You would like to travel a bit more? Is that what you're saying?
I'm super optimistic, to be honest. I think that we are on the verge for perhaps the best years of our lives, even though this might not seem obvious. But what I'm experiencing is a new plateau of innovation being ready, which will open the way for new founders to pop and start exploring those technologies and new problems to be tackled. And also, I think in European terms, we need to start working on the next layer and being pan-European and not really only regional, and bridge better with Israel. So I'm really optimistic with that. Looking forward to make that happen.
I'm actually very happy you say that, and must be motivating for people in here, and I would be happy to join in that, by the way. So I see a question from Bartolome. What would you like to ask? I can't hear you, Bartolome. Yeah, type it, please. And in parallel, maybe you can put on the next question, Christy. But first, let's see what the question from Bartolome is. Yeah, and if you'd like to, you can type in the next question already, right? Erasmus Plus is a program that was something that we shall use to travel. Employees can work on other aspects. Bartolome, am I correct to understand that you mean that we should definitely dive into the possibilities of using the Erasmus Plus program? Should I understand your remark as such? Yeah. Yeah, to do some intern and exchange activities, right? That's to see it's working. Yeah, I think that's Nora. I hope you're taking notes. I think we should discuss this with the program. So I'm going to dive into some of the questions here. As you understand, we are moving towards the end of the session. Trying to have more fun. My ecosystem is too serious. Yeah, that's good to do. But taking in mind the remark about fun but effective, but I totally subscribe to that remark. Consolidating the startup environment. Yes, building local startup community with multiple stakeholders. Yeah, that's what we will share the Excel sheet for as well. And we've been working on that in the Drive training as well, of course. Successful collaborators, the way you communicate matters. Law of big numbers. Go to Boston. That's always nice. Engage stakeholders constantly and build valuable collaborations. Yeah. In a structural way, and then attracting more financial resources for ecosystem building activities. Yeah, that's always relevant, and I think we should definitely start to work on that ecosystem maturity framework, because then it's something that you can show to potential regional or national or international funders. Look, this is what we are going to, this is what we're going to build, and we are now here, so let's invest in that. Creating a shift in the mindset of ecosystem players and entrepreneurs to a can-do attitude. Very relevant, very challenging as well. So be sure to look into how-to ideas for that. Build a more effective, and also with the attitude and mindset, also start already in the student phase. Start very early on by people working on real-world challenges, etc. So it's really also a young people effort as well. Build a more effective collaboration among stakeholders. Yeah, I think we've seen that before. Bringing different stakeholders together. Yeah, make sure there's enough fresh blood in the ecosystem. I suppose this comes from our friends from Romania. But true, of course. And then foster a community sense of belonging and synergy, building among the ecosystem, I suppose. Synergy building, yeah, so belonging and community sense. I think this is also some of the things that Alexandre talked about in the beginning, and this is very relevant. Find someone who will be able to pay for our activities without short-term results. Again, I refer to this framework that we should have. Oh, there's more. No, this was the last one.
That's the end, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So are there any questions still remaining for people to the speakers? This is your time. Either use Mentimeter or raise your hand or type it in the chat. I think there was a remark from Quite a big remark from George. Was that a question, George, or was it just something to share? Yeah, not a question. So I think we really discussed a lot today. And we are coming to a natural end by this, I guess. Yeah. Thank you for stopping share. Yeah, Yoav.
I want to state one important thing, that as you're all developing ecosystems, and so am I, it's really important, and I constantly push my team to create what we call dependency, right? An ecosystem doesn't really have a commercial reason for being, right? We don't have earnings, we don't have shareholders, we don't have some government policy, whatever. So for us as HealthIL to remain alive, we need to create dependency, and that's going to be different for each and every one of you. I agree with what Alex said. You need to take a deep dive into what gaps exist in your ecosystem, right? Which by definition is going to be local, city, municipal, regional, country, maximum, and figure out where there are holes that you can fill to create dependency. The only way that HealthIL has been around for as long as it has is because we have figured out exactly where everyone else in the system is dependent on us. That can be in your knowledge of the investors. It can be in your knowledge of the multinationals. But without that, no one's going to turn to you. And that's the last thing you want. You want people to turn to you. And in order to do that, you must figure out how you create complete and total dependency on you. That's the only reason HealthIL has been around for 7 years. We constantly work on creating that dependency on us here in Israel.
Thank you. That's a very nice addition. I agree also with Alexandre said, you shouldn't do this because there's an EU funding for it or something, or national funding or whatever. But you should have the narrative of your own existence, and dependency is just crucial in that. So somehow you need to find that. And then money will follow from that. So for your existence. So that's you should really turn that the other way around.
I'm sorry, but the lack of money is an aggregator.
Sorry, would you like to explain?
Yes, if founders understand something is a lack of resources, so bring them inside. You don't have to have full access to all the resources. That's it. Let's bring problems to the table, not solutions. They are founders, they are entrepreneurs. They will help us find the way to. So in my experience, the lack of money is actually somewhat a tough positive thing, because it aggregates people and brings people together around if you start working, then you'll move on to a different maturity level where money will start flowing and following your talent and the results that you're delivering, or you will find where the money is and you'll travel. So it's really easy to put the conversation on the money side, and I totally back that. It's really important. It would make me sleep better if we had all the money that we needed, but I'm not sure if we would have built the ecosystem with the same results and the same shared values and cohesiveness around the purpose of what we are building.
Thank you. And with that, we are at 12:30. So I would like to use these as very inspiring end words of this session. I would like to thank Yoav, Tamas, and Alexandre for all their very inspiring words and their insights and wisdom. I learned a lot myself again as well. That's always why it's fun to have these talks. There will be a recording of the session, and we will share that. And also we will share, hopefully if Yoav can share his Excel, we can share that with the listeners as well. And also the title of the book you all need to read. Tamas shared that already in the chat, but we will make an after mail where you can find the organizations that our speakers work for and these extra pieces of information and the link to the recording. So with that, I would like to send you off with to have a very nice day and a very effective and vibrant innovation startup ecosystem. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you guys. Goodbye. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day.
Bye.